The Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper. And now, Coach Bill Clark.
Welcome in. It's the Coach Bill Clark Show. Coach Bill Clark, Pat Smith, along with Molly Robinson, brought to you by Dr. Pepper and, of course, our good friends over at Buffalo Rock. Coach, I hope you've had a good week.
Yeah, been a good week. How about you?
Oh, it's been fantastic. We've got Final Four going on, Coach, so let's start there. We've talked about the Auburn Tigers for weeks now, and how impressive have they looked, Coach, as they get ready to do battle against the Florida Gators, a team that they've already played this season?
You know, I think the thing that I love about them from the get-go has been physicality. You know, and I think we know there's an offensive component. We talked about it in the last few shows about having the ability to run and gun and take the threes and all those things. But they're a physical team. They play defense. You know, and I think that to me, you know, we've talked a lot about training. That's what they look like to me. You know, they put their bodies on you. They play awfully hard. And you've got all kind of other components, and you know, Bruce Pearl always comes up with these great set plays coming out of timeouts and things like that. So there's always that coaching part of that, obviously, that goes in. But their fundamentals and they're just how hard they play, I love.
Well, one thing's for sure, this Auburn team's on a historic run, and they don't seem like a team to me. And when you've seen them, do they look like they've played tight at any point this year?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think it seems like they rise to the moment. I mean, and I know it starts with coaching. You know, I look over there at him on the side. He's having a good time. There's high energy. They play with high energy. And, you know, this is a team, even though we could probably look and say maybe Florida has advantage with height and some of these other things, but I think this is not a team to bet against.
We've asked you this question before, but I find it very fascinating because you've got the mental and the physical side of when you're preparing for an opponent. If you're Florida, how good do you feel going into the game knowing that you went into their place and you spanked them pretty good? I mean, you had them up by 21 points. You ended up winning by 9, but Auburn was number 1 in America, and you went into a very difficult place and you won. That confidence level, how does that play into the Final Four going up against Auburn for a second time?
You know, I think it's a double-edged sword there. I think, one, you feel really good. Hey, we know we've already shown we can beat them, and we've played, you know. But now you also throw all that out, and there's this having to beat somebody after they've got this revenge factor. You know, it's just such a – people, they try and count some of those things out, and if we're pretty evenly matched and they've had to live with this loss, I don't know, there's something about that. You know, it's just – and it all goes back to certain teams and how they are. Obviously, we got Broome with, you know, how well is he. There's obviously injury situations there, but you got the Florida side of that they're going to feel confident. But I think you've also got the side from Auburn that's going, you know, we're not going to let that happen again.
Throughout your career, all the times that you've had to play a team twice, and I understand football may be different in regards to the way you approach, but you always hear that adage in sports. It's always tough to beat a team a second or a third time. Talk about what Auburn's coaches, and what do you do? Do you go back and you look at that film of that first game, the tendencies, or do you maybe rely more on what took place after that game and what Florida did, and that's how you combat whatever you're going to face on Saturday?
It's both. I mean, I think it's both. I think you definitely go back and look at that game. And having been in those games, there's all kind of different reasons things happen. And sometimes when you win, you're saying, okay, in your mind, you're all right, we're better, especially if it's just a one game. We're better. When you lose, you really go back and dissect it. And sometimes you said, I knew right after that game I was not going to do that again. When we play these suckers again, we're going to go at totally different. I think sometimes when you win, you relax a little bit in your planning. I'm not saying that's the case now because obviously it's the Final Four, but I do think there's a little bit of that when you lose, you really look at things so much harder. And this is, you know, you won by a field goal, you won by a last-second shot in basketball, whatever, but you still won. You know, and you kind of move on. When you lose, you look at it, you watch it, you go back over it. Why did we lose? And it could have come down to one shot. Now, obviously, that wasn't the case when Florida beat them, but for me, it seems fun to be in that team that just lost, you know.
In your career, and you might not know this off the top of your head, but in your career – when you had that multiple matchups in a season, were you more victorious than being on the other side of the stick?
Yeah, and I didn't have a ton of those, but yes, I was. But I did have an interesting stat. A friend of mine who's a UAB guy, he said, you know, every time you lost, go back and look at the stats. He said, I'm not a bettor, but I bet on you. and you always won. I said, well, yeah, that is something that
Wow.
I
wish I'd have known that a few years ago, Molly.
Yeah. So he said, you always covered. He said, and I went back.
Did you really?
Yeah, I don't know. I just,
Once again, that would have been.
I don't like losing.
That would have
I
been
don't like
helpful,
losing
Coach.
twice. So
That would have been helpful.
I didn't even know that. So that was kind of interesting.
Well, that's good. I suppose you never, because in region play in high school.
Yeah.
Now we've at Hewitt Trustful, it seems like
Right.
we've had to play Hoover and Thompson.
Yep.
Twice. But when you're at Prattville, did you ever have to, on your way to a state championship, have to play somebody a second time?
Yeah, we did. We played. Happened to me a couple times. Once we lost, once we won. Then in college with Middle Tennessee, they beat us, and we came back and beat them. But no, I don't know. It's interesting. I came up on the short end of the stick one time. We won. Probably shouldn't have won. We found a way to win in overtime, and it's one of them. Thank God we got out of here with a win. Then you got to go see them again in the playoffs. The other time we won both times. We were down our quarterback the first time. We won barely. The next time it was 28-0 at half. We had them 28-0 at half. So, a lot of that That's why I say it was somebody injured.
Yeah.
Did you kind of overcome things? Were you kind of lucky in the win or whatever that is? So there's always these factors that go into that.
I got to ask you this from a coaching perspective, because a lot of fans, we have this debate a lot on three-man front. Would you rather, as a fan, not being in a position to play for a championship and then lose that championship, than have a okay year but not be in a position to even get to a championship? As a coach, I know it hurts if you don't win that championship, but you think about all the work that you put into it and what you did as a family and as a team. I think it goes without saying, I think you would answer that yes, it's disappointing that you lost the big one, but getting there means so much to that team and in you as a person.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. Now, I will say this, because I would answer, if you asked me that 100 times, 1, 2, 3, all the way through, yes, just get us there. Just get us there. But I'm telling you, when you get there and you don't win it, you feel the pressure the next time. I mean, it just and luckily I was able to come out, on the good side the next time. But I mean, it's something you feel, and you've seen these guys that get that. We talk about the Buffalo Bills or whoever it is, and there's all kind of reasons. Each game is different. It's different teams, but it becomes a pressure situation. And I mean, to get to that championship game and lose it is pure misery. But I would still not trade it for an average year.
So we talked to Wimp Sanderson, Hall of Fame coach, former Alabama head basketball coach, every Friday on the show, and he preaches this constantly. And I want to get your thoughts on this. It's every game the team has its own personality. Like your team has a personality throughout the season, but every game takes on a life of its own. Kind of explain that and what that means for you as a coach and the individuals, the young people that you're coaching.
Gosh, we could really take the whole show talking about that one thing, which is, okay, what is going on that week? Just from,
and that's where the outside noise and everything comes in.
Oh my gosh! I mean, I will say it again, 1,000,000% of the time I want to win. I will teach. Let's have a close game where we still won, and I get to teach them all these lessons. Hey, we should have lost. Now, what happens sometimes? You find ways to win and win and win. That a lot of times will catch up with you, as we both know. You've won games maybe you shouldn't. You've gotten lucky. You're still having these same bad habits. My deal was, let's correct these bad habits. And my guys always said, Coach, it always feels like a loss after we won, because that was a goal. Hey, we won, but the next day when we're watching that film, you're going to think we lost. And sometimes there were games where it was hard to find things like that. But once again, injuries. Did somebody get injured in this game? The matchups. What happened? I mean, how many times we go, this week this team got destroyed. Their quarterback was out. Somebody was out. Now, granted, the quarterback was definitely a piece of that, but we've got family issues. We've got social issues. You've got all these things. What goes into that game? Are you at home? Did you travel? I wanted to take away as many of those things. That's why I wanted the same home routine, the same road routine, how we ate, how we did walkthroughs. And when you know that it works, don't change it, right? Because that's how you get consistency, Right. And I think, but each game is truly has its own life. And that's how I've always looked at the difference as a football coach, where there's only these X amount of opportunities to play, and it puts so much more pressure. And that's why I used to tell guys in football, I said, you understand this game lasts forever. Basketball, you got a 1, you got a 2. Oh, we're going to see each other in the tournament. We may see each other again. As we talked about before on basketball, you're trying to get that horse. You get that horse running the best at the end of that race, at the end of the season. Football, these games are important. Oh, they're going to go back and look at that play in the second quarter. They're all going to remember. I wanted to speak in a historical context in football because there was less of them, and they were also important.
All right, let's talk about game day, because I'm fascinated by this conversation. So let's say you have a whole week, just great prep.
Yeah.
Guys seem locked in. Coaches are on the same page, looking good. You're feeling good. Then you get to game day, and it's whether the bus is late or whether, the food's bad or you just get that bad juju on game day. Was there ever a situation like that where you had a really great week leading up to that, but there was something outside took place
100%.
Before the game that kind of maybe threw you off kilter as a coach or as a team?
Yeah, and one of those things that I couldn't foresee, especially as a coach in a new situation. So I'll give you an example of Prattville. Get there summer of '99. They've had really struggled, hardly any players. I take the job in June. We get there, and all of a sudden, we are sitting at 6-2. I mean, you're talking about grace of God. This is a miracle season. We're playing good, and we go play Robert E. Lee, who they had never beaten in the history of the school on the road. Never. Had only beaten them one time ever in the history of the school. We get there, and they're just looking around like we're playing at the Green Bay Packers or the Dallas Cowboys Stadium. And I'm like,
right.
Wait, this is the same Crampton Bowl we've been in. Come back the next year, we start have to go back. The way region areas got changed, we win the game there. Night before we go see, remember the Titans. I mean, I could tell you at least stories. Same thing, first time we played in the state championship game, and they're looking at Legion Field. We couldn't afford to go to the stadium the night before. I think I told that story. We didn't. The money was not. They didn't provide hotels.
So you drove up the day of the game.
Drove up day of the game. Stupid. Just not very smart. I said from then on, we will sell cookie dough, whatever it takes. We're going to stay in a hotel tonight. Control all these things, but they're looking around. I still remember we played Florida. Great week of practice. Everything. They're looking around. My when we brought it back in 2017. So I can go through these games where I thought we're prepared. I don't know that beat us, but it sure created a different sense. And then I would see the difference the next time I thought I fixed it, and we were ready. I mean, we were ready. We go the night before, and we sit in the stadium with our toboggans on at the state championship. We get the feel of the game. Take your pictures. One of the reasons I always want to go the day before the game, and I hear people that don't do that, but I wanted to go. Hey, take your pictures of the locker room, see the state. Now, if I played in 100,000 all the time, it might be a little different. But I wanted them to feel it. I wanted to see how long it took to get to the press box for the coaches.
So you were down to that minute. Wow.
Yeah, I'm in the minutia because we only get so many chances at this. I'm going to get graded on this game for a lifetime. So I think it's kind of important. And I want to know locker room, food setup, what's the food, we've talked about it. And, my ops guy, you say, let me tell you something, do not mess this meal up. Because it's that important.
Sure. Wow. Fascinating conversation here on the Bill Clark Show with Coach Bill Clark. And another thing that we don't have to ask any questions about, and that's Smart Bank. Fine sponsor of this program. They are consistent as consistency can get.
Yeah, I love that our sponsors are really who we say they are, and I think that's what's always so cool when you can find somebody that you say, the people at that bank are really good at what they do. They were great before they came to Smart Bank. Smart Bank, local hometown banking with all the amenities you need. So go check our friends out at Smart Bank.
Coach, there's been a lot of discussion this week and the last few weeks in regards to that spring game that ultimately the NCAA said, no, not going to happen.
Right.
Syracuse was willing to go to Colorado and play a spring game. NCAA, they kind of said, well, just don't have enough information on that. If you're sitting in Indianapolis in the NCAA office, so what would be your hang up about them not having an opportunity to scrimmage each other? Like, what would be the rationale?
Well, and I don't know of a reason anymore because we've cut out almost every rule that they had. So, I mean, why not? Who knows? To me, anything that helps the game, and I could see that next year being a thing they just go ahead and allow people to do, with the fact that now we're starting to lose the games that they were playing just because with the very nature of the portal. So if somebody's willing to do it, I think they should let them.
Yeah, it's just odd because if you do have those two teams and they're not worried about each other stealing players,
right?
And that they're going to be as safe as possible because you don't want to have certain silly injuries.
Right.
Why not let them play?
Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of things that I understand. I could see that getting changed next year. Especially as, like I said, as we lose people, less people do spring games, which was such a great part of our culture.
I'm going to hit you with a couple of fast hitters here because these are just some storylines that have popped up the last couple of days and get your immediate reaction. So you had the Grambling State basketball coach. He comes out and he says, okay, I have no problem with the transfer portal. I have no problem with guys moving on and doing whatever to better themselves. But you know what? We had an investment in them. And if somebody leaves, I think there needs to be a buyout. Your thoughts on that potential, not only for like a lower division, but let's just take a UAB, for example. You recruit a kid, you bring him in, you're able to develop him, and then all of a sudden he decides that he's going to go to an Alabama or Auburn. Should UAB be compensated for that individual for leaving?
Well, I mentioned this a few weeks ago. I don't know if he might have caught it. I do know of one instance, and it's in the SEC, where somebody has already been compensated. Surprised that has not come out. Now, that was from multiple sources that I was told that. Obviously that was a breaking of a contract,
right?
But I think that's a good idea. Once again, not hurting the players, but something that just creates some kind of standard here to at least give some compensation to these lower level folks who are just getting destroyed.
And yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. You've got these lower schools that will go out and let's say you find that diamond in the rough.
Correct.
And you bring them in, and maybe that kid coming out of high school was 185 pounds. You get him in your program, you get him fed right, you start working him out, and then all of a sudden he's at 220.
Yeah.
And he's a different specimen.
I didn't give him the time of day, and we find him, we develop him, we coach him. Okay, it's better for the player. We've established that. All right,
yes.
It's better for the player. But let's compensate this school. At least they could turn around and put that on their other players with nutrition and training, and everybody would win. And money's really not a big problem for these guys, so why not?
The other issue that a lot of people, and we heard the head football coach at Kansas State, Coach Kleiman, he made a comment about this. And I think this is a storyline that a lot of people have not been thinking about. Part of this House settlement, these rosters are going to have to get to 105.
Yep.
No more walk-ons.
Insane.
No more scout team. Just, if you would, just kind of explain in your time at UAB, the roster management the last couple of years that you were there in regards to your numbers, like how many you had on scholarship, how many you had as a walk-on program, and how many you really felt like you needed to have a competitive football program.
Yeah, so one of the big things, the number was less in summer until school started, and we finally got that changed,
resolved,
and we got it. First, we got to 105, and I think the last few years they were starting to let them just take everybody. That is so good when you're dealing with heat and the amount of people practicing. But what I loved about it was you really can get walk-on guys in that program. They can work out, they can train, they can develop. And you start watching these guys. I cannot tell you the number of guys that we put on scholarship off walk-off because we have such great football around our area. So I could tell guys, look, we're going to treat you. And this was a big thing for me, seat 1, seat 10. If you're looking at in my team room, seat 20, I'm looking at all these seat numbers. We're going to treat you all like scholarship players. If you don't ask the guy beside you and tell him you're a walk-on, he should know. Now, maybe he knows by ability, and obviously these things come out. But I wanted all my walk-ons to feel they got the same equipment, they had good lockers. And what that developed was we got so many great leaders, so many great kids who are paying their own way, who loved UAB football. They loved Birmingham. They loved the area, and they made our team and our program so much better. And then they had a chance to go earn scholarships, and tons of those guys earned scholarships. Maybe they played some, maybe they played on special teams. Some of them became starters. The stories are countless. It just makes me sick.
So moving forward, what will that mean to, let's say, the scout team? I'm talking about, I know plenty of kids that have been able to walk on at Alabama and Auburn, and all of a sudden guys that literally they were running scout teams.
Yep.
Like they were active participants
Yep.
trying to get the first and second team ready for that
Yep.
weekend's opponent. What happens now? Who runs those scout teams?
Well, you'll end up having more players that are playing. They'll have to serve each other even more. And we did some of that. We did what I called A versus B, where we had the next in line guys.
Right.
But just giving those guys opportunity. I think that's the biggest thing here. The opportunity is going to be missing for guys who, if at worst, became part of this team. There were guys that became part of this team that led them to great lives because of how much we know what athletics does for these kids, and being part of a team, and to say they played UAB football or Alabama football or Auburn football or whatever that may be, they were part of that team and college football players.
And a lot of people don't know, but the House settlement, it should become official by a judge sometime within the next 60 days or so, under the 60-day window. And at that point in time, the individual schools, if you can afford it, you can pay up to $21 million a year in regards to paying your student athletes across all the different sports. And I think we can all imagine, Coach, that the majority at the FBS level are going to be paying their football team because it's their largest, obviously,
right.
Largest rosters that you have on
Sure.
campus. So we'll see what happens. But, yeah, they got to get down to 105. Donahue Chevrolet, another great sponsor of this program. I saw you in your Tahoe riding in today, and, yeah, it's good to see that you got it washed.
Yeah, trying to keep it washed. But, once again, same thing as we talked about a minute ago with SmartBank. Donahue, those folks, they're a staple in our community. You've got, obviously, Chevrolet. We're talking about Donahue Chevrolet, so they've got great Chevy deals there, and they're always running specials, but they're just great folks to deal with, and I've bought multiple cars from them. They're going to give you the best deal they can, so Donahue Chevrolet, go check them out.
We continue on now with the Coach Clark Show. And, Coach, one thing that you are doing now as the president of Coach Safely, for those that do not know what this organization is about, to just kind of educate the listeners of Jocks.
Yeah, real quickly, and hopefully everybody starting in Alabama has heard about Coach Safely now, but this organization started in 2015. Jack Crow, if we remember Jack, we've had him on our show before, but Coach Bo Jackson at Auburn was offensive coordinator there. Clemson, Arkansas, became head coach at Arkansas, and I followed him at Jacksonville State. He was a UAB grad, along with Jimmy Lee, who we talk about, Buffalo Rock, and Dr. Jimmy Andrews, who everybody knows that name. We were kind of the guys behind the scenes with Jack as we started a youth coach training program. So this is below junior high age, and really, we say 14 and under, but if they get to a junior high and they've got a scholastic program going on, we're not really dealing with those. But coach training, coach education. So when you start talking about heat illness and concussions and all that safety, we've created a course. We passed as law, the first law in the country for youth sports coaches. We have a platform. You go in and they take a test, and we'll talk about this. But Hewitt Trustful was one of our first folks to do that.
Sure was.
We've got it running across the state. We're adding to the law this year, trying to get us up to 100%. We're not, we're a long way from there right now as far as coaches, but it's such a great platform to train these coaches. We want this to become a national program. But what we really have become, and this was always my thing, was so they'll play, And when I've said this before, I'm talking to the players at UAB or back to prep or wherever. Safety is just a given, But these are trained high school coaches, are trained where they hear about safety, they hear about heat illness, they hear about concussion. We need that for our youth coaches. And people think of football when we start talking about concussions. I could talk about soccer, where these young girls are trying to hit a ball that might have water on it or whatever, or lacrosse, or all the safety parts. But we're really expanding into, and I say so they will play, but safety so they'll play, of course, but also underserved communities, getting these kids out, trying to get coaches out for these guys, create scholarships for them. And we got such a great board with people like Isaiah Reese, who runs the NFL flag football, Ron Corson, who's the head trainer at Georgia. I could just go on these guys that we have on this part of our staff, you would say. But youth sports coaching rules and a law for that to get our coaches trained to keep our young athletes safe.
Well, there's so many things. Coaching both my sons for many, many years, and I was a part of that program because we were the first one in the state to be required and to do this program. Is not only but being able to recognize when you might have a player that's injured, that's been concussed.
Yes.
And what you need to do and the parameters that have been established and the warning signs and what you need to do from that as a youth coach. So it's not only about maybe it's heat exhaustion.
Yes.
When you're out there practicing and things of that nature. And as you mentioned, the Alabama, I know our state gets dinged a lot, but for us to be the first in the country,
correct,
to be able to pass this, kind of talk about where the spokes go from here, because I know you've got a bigger plan with Coach Safely.
Yeah, so let's make sure we recognize Jabbo Wagner.
Right.
And we know that name, Jabbo Wagner, that heads the Senate in the state. This is his bill that he got passed along with our – and that's where leadership comes in. When they recognize an issue, we put something in front of them and they pass it. You remember we had a commercial a few years ago, and it was Nick Saban and Bruce Pearl and myself and other coaches – talking about Coach Safely, and let's get a part of that. And we had a great event where we had Paul Feinbaum interviewing Lou Holtz. We're going to do something this year. I can't say exactly who it is, but you're going to be involved. I've drafted you to be involved with this in August, but we'll be getting that out hopefully here in about a week or so about an event that helps raise funds to put this in these underserved communities, whether it's buying equipment or whatever. But you've got all these safety factors. You got a mental health.
Right.
So there we've got parts of this course when you go in there and look at it. And I was telling my family, I said, every one of you needs to take this. And if you want to go on to you can Google Coach Safely, and if you put in Alabama, right now it's all of it's covered. So if you put in an Alabama zip code, you're covered. Take that course. There's so many facets, and like I said, you've got the mental health side. You've got overuse injuries. It's like this whole deal, like a kid pitching
too much
year-round.
Yep.
These are these overuse injuries that we're having Tommy John surgeries at 14 years old and crazy things like that because of overuse. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to keep it safe so they will play, so we can get as many athletes out on the field, male and female, to gain all the benefits of sports that we believe in.
And the benefit of this is that Senator Tuberville is very, very well known and someone that knows the work of Coach Safely, and that's obviously a big person to know in D.C. to help try to get this moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I'm telling you, all of our legislators, and Katie Britt, Tommy Tuberville, I can just go through the list. They're all supportive. They all believe in it. But we want to take this national. Arkansas took our bill and passed it. It was kind of one of those things where it just kind of happened, and so now. Georgia, Tennessee, specifically in the Southeast, but we think this is something we could take national, and Alabama will be the leader in this initiative.
Yeah, and when you take the course, this is, I know a lot of people might immediately think, well, this is just about youth football. It's not. You brought up the girls soccer, or young boys soccer, and lacrosse, and all these other sports that you can be affected. So that's why it's important, no matter whether you're coaching youth football or youth baseball, you need to be a part of this.
Softball, any sport, it is generic to the sport. We're going to come back and add some modules that'll be specific to each sport, but this is a non-gender. I mean, it's all across the board, male and female. It works for all these, and it's just an organization and all those things that a youth coach should know going in. They just don't have the training for, because these are parents usually. They're trying to take care of this team.
Just volunteer coaches.
Yeah, but we realize there's a competitive edge to this, and so how can you be competitive but still do the right things? And that's what we're trying to do.
Coach, one of our good fine sponsors, K9 Global Protection Group. Man, those guys are fantastic.
They really are. This is a veteran-owned, veteran-ran group. These are the dogs that you see at NFL games, at major league games. Colleges throughout our state use their canines. And they can smell bombs. They can smell guns. So thank God we got these guys. They're also at our airports.
Yep.
And we appreciate them believing in our show and what they're doing just to keep us safe at these events.
Yeah, we'd like to thank Smart Bank Donahue Chevrolet Global Canine Protection Group for their sponsorship. And, of course, Buffalo Rock, our title sponsor. Dr. Pepper, those fine folks, and Jimmy Lee, all that they do, not only for us, but just for the Birmingham community. They've been outstanding.
Yeah, they're so philanthropic. They're involved in all our universities, that you can think of, but also just believing in sports. And, of course, Jimmy Lee and Buffalo Rock, a big sponsor and supporter of Coach Saban. Thanks for joining us. We're here each week at 6 o'clock here on Jocks 94.5. This is the Coach Bill Clark Show. For Coach Bill Clark, Molly Robinson, I'm Pat Smith. Have a great week.
This has been the Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper.